A cowboy's mercy saved her after brutal beatings. "I won't leave you." Emily had always dreamed of a simple life, one filled with quiet mornings and soft sunlight spilling into her small bedroom window. She grew up in a town where everyone knew everyone, and the fields stretched wide like golden seas under the sun. As a child, she had run barefoot through the grass, chasing butterflies and listening to the soft hum of nature around her. Those days were full of laughter and freedom, and she remembered them with a longing that never faded even as she grew older. But life, Emily soon learned, could be cruel. Her 20s had brought challenges she had never imagined. The person she once trusted most became her source of pain. Every day, she walked on eggshells, afraid of anger, afraid of the words that could hurt her more than anything else. And yet Emily carried on, holding tightly to the hope that things could get better, that someday the fear would fade and she would find peace again. Emily lived in a small, weathered house at the edge of town. Its white paint was chipped, and the roof sagged slightly in the middle, but to her, it was her world, her sanctuary. The little garden in front of the house bloomed with wildflowers in the spring, and she often imagined planting rows of vegetables and watching them grow tall and strong. But dreams alone could not erase the fear she felt each time she walked through the front door, each time she heard footsteps that made her heart pound in her chest. Her abuser's presence was like a shadow that followed her everywhere. Emily never knew what might trigger anger that day. Sometimes it was a misplaced item, sometimes it was silence when he wanted words. The unpredictability made her anxious all the time, and she learned to shrink herself, to make herself as small as possible, in the hopes that the storm would pass. She often went to bed wishing she could disappear, wishing the world could pause just long enough for her to breathe freely. Despite the fear, Emily had moments of courage. She kept a journal hidden beneath her mattress, where she wrote about her dreams and her fears. She wrote about running through open fields and feeling the wind in her hair, about laughing without worry and living without fear. Those pages became her refuge, a place where she could still feel free, even when the walls of her home felt like a cage. She read them often, letting her imagination carry her to a world far from her troubles. Emily's friends noticed a change in her over time. She had once been lively and full of energy, someone who laughed easily and spoke freely. But now she smiled rarely and kept her words short. She avoided gatherings, avoided places where she might have to explain bruises or answer questions she could not. The isolation weighed heavily on her, yet she felt trapped, unable to speak out. The town was small, and whispers traveled quickly, leaving her afraid of judgment or disbelief. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Emily sat on her porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes traced the edges of the horizon, longing for a world beyond her reach. That evening, as the wind rustled through the trees, she felt the weight of the day pressing down harder than ever. Tears came unbidden, slipping silently down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, "I can't do this anymore," though she didn't yet know how she could escape the darkness that surrounded her. Emily's abuser was unpredictable, and some days were worse than others. The fear that something small could ignite anger made her jumpy, always alert to the slightest movement or sound. She would sit quietly in a room, holding her breath when he entered, hoping to remain unnoticed. Even the simplest tasks, like cooking or cleaning, became exercises in caution, where one wrong move could lead to harsh words or worse. Emily's world had become a place where safety was never guaranteed, and comfort felt like a memory from someone else's life. Despite it all, Emily had resilience. She had survived this long, and in her heart, a small spark of hope remained. She remembered the times when she had felt love from her family, when she had felt proud of herself for simple achievements. Those memories were her lifeline, reminders that life could be gentle and kind, that one day she might feel happiness without fear again. She clung to those moments, replaying them in her mind like a comforting story that she could return to whenever the present felt unbearable. But that hope was fragile. One evening, the tension in her home escalated to a level Emily had never experienced before. Every word spoken felt heavy, every movement watched with suspicion. The air in the room seemed thick, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Emily's heart raced as she tried to anticipate the next blow, bracing herself for what she could not fully escape. And then it happened, a confrontation that left her reeling, a moment that seemed to shatter the fragile sense of security she had been holding onto. After the incident, Emily curled up in a corner of her home, trembling and exhausted. Her body ached, but it was the emotional weight that left her most drained. She felt a strange mixture of despair and disbelief, unable to comprehend how her life had reached this point. Yet even in that darkness, she clung to a thought that refused to leave her mind. The possibility that someone, somewhere, might notice her suffering and extend a hand of kindness. That thought, small as it was, gave her the strength to endure another night, to survive another day. Emily's nights became a time for quiet reflection. She would sit by the window and look out at the moon, tracing its path across the sky. She imagined a world where she could walk freely, breathe without fear, and smile without hesitation. Those nights, though lonely, gave her a sense of clarity. She understood that she could not stay trapped forever. She needed help even if she didn't yet know from whom or where it would come. In the midst of her suffering, Emily's inner strength began to grow. It was not the kind of strength that shouted or fought back. It was quiet, patient, and persistent. She learned to notice small acts of control she still had, locking her door, keeping her journal hidden, or simply surviving another day. Each small victory, though seemingly insignificant, reinforced the belief that she could endure, that she could hold on until help arrived. Emily's story in this part ends at a turning point. She had endured years of fear, pain, and isolation, yet her spirit remained unbroken. She sat by her window, the night air cool against her skin, her thoughts a mixture of sorrow and hope. Deep down, she knew that change was possible, that someone out there could see her struggle and offer her the safety she longed for. That night she whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "I just need someone to care, someone to save me." It was a small plea, but it marked the beginning of a journey that would soon alter her life forever. Emily had spent countless nights thinking about escape, wondering if someone could ever notice her pain and offer a hand of help. Little did she know that someone was closer than she imagined, someone whose life was as quiet and steadfast as the wide-open fields surrounding the town. Jack lived on a ranch not far from Emily's home. He was a man shaped by hard work and long days under the sun. His skin was tanned from years spent outdoors, and his hands were rough but careful, skilled in handling animals and tending the land. Despite his rugged appearance, there was a gentleness in his eyes, a kindness that rarely went unnoticed by those who met him. Jack had always felt a deep connection to the quiet strength of nature, the calm in a grazing herd, the patience required to care for a newborn calf, the steady rhythm of life on the land. It was in this world that he thrived, away from the complexities and conflicts of towns and people, yet he had a heart that could not ignore suffering when he saw it. One late afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jack rode along the dusty trail that led past Emily's neighborhood. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of the fields and wildflowers. He often took this route to check fences and ensure his animals were safe. As he rounded a bend near the edge of town, something unusual caught his attention. He slowed his horse, noticing movement near one of the houses. There was a figure, a young woman, sitting alone on a worn porch, her posture tense and hesitant. There was something about the way she held herself, small, fragile, yet defiant, that pulled at Jack's heart. He had seen pain before in animals that were injured or scared, and in people who carried burdens silently. But there was a certain quiet urgency about this young woman, a vulnerability that demanded attention. Jack dismounted slowly, tying his horse to a nearby post, careful not to startle her. Emily, noticing the approaching figure, froze. Her first instinct was fear. Fear of strangers, fear of attention, fear that help might not be genuine. She had learned over time that even when someone offered kindness, it could be dangerous, that people often looked the other way when trouble arose. Yet there was something different about this man. His movements were calm, deliberate, and without judgment. Even from a distance, she could feel the sincerity in his gaze. Jack kept his voice soft when he spoke. "Evening, mind if I sit for a moment?" he asked. His tone was gentle, respectful, offering space for Emily to respond, or not. Emily hesitated, her heart pounding. The words felt foreign to her ears, words that seemed normal and safe, unlike the harsh commands she had grown accustomed to hearing. Finally, she nodded slightly, a small gesture that allowed him to sit on the steps near her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind whispered through the trees, and the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. There was a quiet understanding between them, an acknowledgement of the unspoken struggles that had brought them together. Emily watched Jack carefully, noting the ease with which he held himself, the absence of judgment in his posture. "I'm Jack," he finally said, offering his hand, not demanding, but extending it as an option. "Emily," she whispered, almost afraid to speak her own name aloud. It felt strange, saying it in the presence of someone who might not harm her, who might not turn away. Jack nodded as if hearing the name gave him some insight into her life. "Nice to meet you, Emily. You look like you've had a long day." There was no probing, no questions pressed too soon. Just a simple observation, spoken with a tone that carried warmth rather than pity. Emily blinked back tears, unsure how to respond. She wanted to speak, to explain the fear and the pain, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, letting silence bridge the space between them. Over the next few days, Jack continued to notice Emily. Sometimes he saw her walking carefully through town, avoiding the main streets, always cautious. Other times, he glimpsed her sitting quietly, watching the world from a distance. Each time, his concern grew, and he began to consider ways he could offer help without overwhelming her. Jack understood patience. He knew that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned slowly, through consistent actions and respect. One evening, as Emily was about to leave her home to walk along a secluded path, she noticed Jack waiting a short distance away. His horse was grazing calmly, and he waved her over. Emily froze, her instincts warning her to keep away. But there was something about the steadiness in his posture, the calmness in his eyes that made her pause. Perhaps it was hope, fragile yet persistent, whispering that this time it could be different. Jack smiled gently. "I thought you might need a friend to walk with you," he said. "No rush, no questions, just someone to share the trail." Emily hesitated, then slowly nodded. She found herself walking alongside him, the space between them comfortable, not forced. As they moved along the trail, the world felt different, less threatening, more open. Birds chirped in the trees above, and the air smelled of fresh earth and grass. Emily began to feel, for the first time in a long while, a sense of normalcy creeping into her life. They spoke sparingly at first. Jack shared stories about life on the ranch, about caring for animals, about the rhythm of the seasons. Emily listened quietly, occasionally offering small replies, learning that conversation could exist without fear. Over time, her words became more frequent, her voice stronger. She discovered that Jack did not rush her, did not push her to share more than she could, and that this patience made her feel safe. One evening, Jack offered her a place to rest for a few hours, a safe spot on his ranch. Emily was hesitant, unsure of whether she could trust anyone with her life, even for a short time. But the desperation for safety, for relief from the constant fear, outweighed her doubts. She accepted, cautiously stepping into a world that was different from anything she had known. The ranch was vast and open, filled with the gentle sounds of nature. Horses nickered softly in their stalls, and the wind carried the scent of hay and earth. Jack led her to a small cabin, cozy and warm, with a soft bed and simple furnishings. There was no judgment, no questions pressed too soon, just a safe space where she could breathe without fear. Emily spent that night resting, her body exhausted from years of tension and worry. As she lay on the bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch, she realized how long it had been since she had felt safe. Tears slipped quietly from her eyes, not from pain this time, but from relief and a fragile sense of hope. She had survived this long, and now, for the first time in years, she felt the possibility of something better. Jack did not intrude. He gave her space, letting her heal at her own pace. He would check in occasionally, offering water or simple words of encouragement, always gentle, always patient. Emily noticed that he kept his promise unspoken but clear. He would not abandon her, would not force her into anything she was not ready for. The trust she had longed for, the safety she had dreamed of, began to take root slowly in her heart. Over the next few days, Emily returned to the ranch, sometimes for walks, sometimes just to sit and breathe in the quiet air. With each visit, her confidence grew. She started to smile again, cautiously, as if testing the waters of a life she had almost forgotten. Jack shared small acts of kindness, offering her freshly baked bread, letting her help feed the animals, teaching her the simple joys of tending the land. These moments, small yet significant, showed Emily that life could be gentle, that she could experience trust and care again. But life's shadows lingered. Emily's past fears did not vanish overnight. She sometimes hesitated before walking certain streets, sometimes flinched at unexpected noises. Jack noticed, always patient, offering reassurance without pressing her to explain. "You're safe here," he would say, simple words that carried immense weight. And slowly Emily began to believe them. The turning point came one afternoon when a reminder of her past threatened to pull her back into fear. A figure from her old life appeared in the distance, walking near her old home. Emily froze, panic rising in her chest. But Jack was there instantly, calm and protective. He did not speak harshly or rush her. He simply stood by her side, offering a presence that felt stronger than any threat. With his quiet support, Emily felt the courage to face the sight without retreating. She realized in that moment that she did not have to be alone anymore. By the time the sun set that evening, Emily's heart had changed. She still carried the memories of pain and fear, but she also carried something new. The understanding that kindness existed in the world, that someone could see her suffering and respond with care rather than harm. Jack's mercy, patience, and gentleness had opened a door she had thought permanently closed. And though the journey ahead would not be easy, Emily knew she had found an ally, a friend who promised without words that she would not be abandoned. That night Emily lay in the small cabin, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch. The wind rustled through the trees, the horses shifted in their stalls, and somewhere in the distance, the soft hum of life continued. For the first time in many years, Emily allowed herself to breathe freely, to feel the quiet comfort of being seen and protected. A small spark of hope glimmered in her heart, a promise that life could be gentle and safe, and that she might one day walk through the world without fear. Emily's life at the ranch gradually became a rhythm she had never known before. The wide-open spaces, the endless sky, and the gentle presence of Jack created a world that was almost like a dream, a place where she could breathe freely without fear. Every morning, the sunlight poured through the windows of the small cabin, casting warm golden light on the wooden floor. Emily would stretch her arms, feeling the calm of the day settle into her bones. For the first time in years, she did not wake with a knot of fear in her chest. Jack's presence was steady, like the quiet flow of a river. He never rushed her, never demanded that she speak of the pain she had endured. Instead, he showed her the simple joys of life, caring for the horses, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs from the nests, and walking along the trails lined with wildflowers and tall grass. These tasks, ordinary to anyone else, became lessons in patience and trust for Emily. She began to notice the small victories, the way her hands could gently brush the soft mane of a horse, the satisfaction of seeing the chickens pecking happily at the feed, the quiet beauty of a sunset reflected in the calm pond. At first, Emily's movements were cautious. Every time she reached out to touch a horse or bend to pick up something, a memory of fear whispered in her mind, reminding her of the world she had left behind. But Jack was always there, quietly guiding her, offering reassurance without words. He would place a hand on her shoulder if she hesitated, or let her practice until she felt confident. Slowly, Emily realized that mistakes were allowed here, that nothing would punish her for being herself. Evenings were her favorite time. After a long day on the ranch, she and Jack would sit outside on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The air smelled of grass, hay, and the faint scent of the horses. Birds sang their evening songs, and the sky blazed with orange and pink. Emily began to speak more freely during these moments, telling Jack small details about herself, stories from her childhood, and dreams she had once thought were impossible. Jack listened with quiet attention, never interrupting, never judging. His presence alone made her feel valued, heard, and safe. One day, Jack handed her a brush for one of the horses, a gentle mare with soft brown fur. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she reached out, but the horse nuzzled her palm as if sensing her unease. "You see," Jack said softly, "she trusts you. You can trust yourself too." Emily smiled faintly, feeling a small sense of pride. It was a simple lesson, but it carried deeper meaning. She was learning to trust again, not just others, but herself. Despite the peace she found at the ranch, shadows of her past still lingered. There were moments when a loud voice or a sudden movement made her flinch. There were nights when nightmares crept into her sleep, and she would wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding. Jack never scolded or forced her to talk about it. He would quietly sit beside her, offering a comforting hand or a reassuring presence until her fear ebbed. "You're safe," he would whisper over and over, until Emily could feel the truth of his words sinking into her heart. As days turned into weeks, Emily began to open up more. She shared memories of her childhood, stories of her hopes, and even the small joys she had once taken for granted. Jack, in turn, shared his own life, speaking of the challenges of ranch work, the beauty of living close to the land, and the lessons he had learned from patience and care. Their conversations were gentle, filled with warmth and a quiet understanding that grew between them. One morning, Emily and Jack set out to repair a fence along the edge of the property. The work was physical and required teamwork. At first, Emily struggled to lift the wooden posts, her muscles unaccustomed to the strain. Jack offered guidance, showing her the proper way to handle the tools, but he never did the work for her. As they hammered and measured together, Emily felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had built something with her own hands, and it was strong and steady, just like the beginnings of her own strength. Over time, Emily discovered a surprising sense of freedom in the simple routines of the ranch. She could wake with the sun, care for the animals, and walk along trails that stretched for miles, all without fear. The more she engaged with the natural world, the more her confidence grew. She found joy in small details: the warmth of sunlight on her face, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work done well. For the first time in years, Emily felt the world was not only bearable but beautiful. Jack and Emily's bond deepened with each passing day. It was a bond built not on grand gestures or dramatic words, but on quiet consistency, patience, and care. Jack never pressured her into feeling safe. He simply provided a steady presence. And Emily, in turn, began to believe that kindness could exist without strings attached. She learned that trust could be rebuilt, not all at once, but gradually, through repeated acts of care and understanding. One afternoon, as they walked along a trail bordered by wildflowers, Emily paused to rest. She looked at Jack and realized something that surprised her. She no longer felt the constant ache of fear in her chest. It was still there sometimes, a whisper from the past, but it had lost its power. The sun glinted on the horizon, and the wind carried the scent of grass and blossoms. Emily felt a lightness she had not known in years, a sense that perhaps life could be gentle, and that she had the strength to face it. But healing was not linear. There were setbacks, moments when memories of her past flooded back and made her feel small and powerless. On one such evening, Emily sat quietly in the cabin, staring at the wall as tears ran down her cheeks. Jack noticed immediately. He sat beside her, placing a hand on hers. "It's okay to feel this way," he said softly. "It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human." Emily leaned into his presence, finding comfort in his patience. Slowly, the tightness in her chest began to ease, replaced by a growing sense of resilience. Jack also encouraged Emily to explore the things she had once loved but had abandoned in her fear. He found her old sketchbook and suggested she try drawing again. Hesitant at first, Emily picked up a pencil, and soon her sketches began to fill the pages: horses, fields, sunsets, and even small portraits of herself. Each stroke of the pencil was a reclaiming of her creativity, her voice, and her self-worth. Jack would glance over occasionally, smiling quietly, never intruding but always supporting. Through these experiences, Emily began to see herself differently. She realized that she was not defined by the pain she had endured, but by her resilience, her courage, and her willingness to keep going despite fear. Jack's unwavering support became a mirror, reflecting the strength she had always possessed but had long forgotten. She began to believe that she could face her past and still move forward, that life could hold joy as well as sorrow. One day, a visitor from town passed near the ranch, a reminder of Emily's life before Jack. Anxiety crept in, threatening to undo the progress she had made. But Jack was there, steady and calm, guiding her through the moment with quiet reassurance. Emily realized that she could face the world, one step at a time, and that she did not have to face it alone. The combination of her own growing confidence and Jack's gentle presence gave her courage she had never known. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's healing continued. She learned to trust herself again, to feel safe in her own skin, and to find joy in everyday moments. She started to laugh more freely, to speak her thoughts without fear, and to take pleasure in the simple beauty of life on the ranch. The animals, the land, and Jack's consistent kindness became her anchors, reminders that she could rebuild a life that was gentle, meaningful, and filled with hope. By the time summer was in full bloom, Emily had transformed in ways she could not have imagined. She still carried memories of the past, but they no longer held the power to define her. She had reclaimed her strength, her voice, and her sense of self. And through it all, Jack's quiet support had been a constant, a reminder that mercy, patience, and compassion could change a life. That evening, as the sun set over the wide-open fields, Emily and Jack stood together on the porch of the cabin. The sky blazed with orange and pink, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees. Emily felt a deep sense of peace, a realization that life could be kind, that she could be free, and that she had someone by her side who would never leave her. For the first time in years, she believed in hope, in trust, and in the possibility of a future filled with light. The warm summer days slowly gave way to the crisp colors of autumn, painting the ranch in shades of gold, orange, and red. Emily moved through the land with a confidence she had never felt before. Her steps were steady, her posture upright, and there was a spark in her eyes, a spark that reflected the strength she had found within herself. Each morning she greeted the sun with gratitude, knowing that she had survived her darkest days and that she now had the power to shape her future. Jack had been a quiet, steady presence in her journey, offering support without demanding anything in return. He celebrated her victories, large and small, without fanfare, simply acknowledging them with a smile, a nod, or a gentle hand on her shoulder. Emily had learned to trust him fully, not just because of his actions, but because of the consistency of his care. There were no conditions attached to his kindness, no strings pulling her backward. With Jack by her side, she had found a sanctuary, a place where her heart could breathe freely. One day, Emily made a decision she had been thinking about for weeks. She would face the world she had left behind and confront the memories that had haunted her for so long. It was not an easy choice, and the anxiety bubbled in her chest as she prepared herself. But Jack's calm presence and quiet encouragement reminded her that she was no longer alone. "You can do this," he said softly, "and no matter what happens, I'll be here." Those words gave her the courage to step forward. Emily returned to her old neighborhood with a mixture of apprehension and determination. As she walked past familiar streets, memories of fear and isolation threatened to overwhelm her. But she focused on the strength she had gained, the lessons she had learned, and the quiet assurance that she could survive anything. She stopped briefly at the places that had once brought her pain, taking a deep breath and reminding herself that she was no longer the same person who had trembled with fear. The encounter with her past was not as frightening as she had imagined. Emily spoke to people she had avoided for years, reestablishing connections she had long feared were lost. She shared her story with a trusted few, careful and selective, and found that many offered compassion and understanding. It was a reminder that while fear could be powerful, courage and honesty could be stronger. Each conversation, each small act of reclaiming her voice, strengthened her resolve and reinforced her belief that she had the right to live a life free from fear. One afternoon, Emily received news that her abuser had been held accountable for past actions. She had taken the brave step of reporting the incidents she had endured, supported by legal authorities and compassionate community members. Emily felt a mix of emotions, relief, fear, and empowerment, all swirling together. For the first time, she felt that justice was possible, that she could close the chapter of her life that had been defined by fear, and that she could fully step into a future of her choosing. Through this process, Emily discovered a newfound independence. She began to manage her own finances, taking small steps to build security and stability. She found part-time work at a local farm supply store, a place that allowed her to be near nature while also contributing to her independence. Each paycheck she earned, each task she completed was a victory, a reminder that she had the power to sustain herself, to make choices, and to live life on her own terms. At the ranch, Jack supported her quietly, never overshadowing her achievements. He celebrated her independence, recognizing that the strength she displayed was something she had cultivated on her own. They worked together on ranch chores, tended to the animals, and shared quiet moments under the open sky. Emily's laughter returned more frequently, unburdened and genuine, a sound that had been absent for too long. Jack's presence had always been a safety net, but Emily realized that she had grown strong enough to stand tall on her own. The bond between Emily and Jack deepened further. It was no longer just a relationship of care and protection. It had transformed into one of mutual respect, trust, and genuine companionship. They shared dreams, hopes, and plans for the future, knowing that whatever challenges might arise, they would face them together. Emily felt a sense of completeness, not because she depended on Jack, but because together they formed a partnership built on understanding, kindness, and shared experiences. One crisp autumn morning, Emily and Jack walked along a trail that overlooked the valley. The sun had just risen, casting a golden glow over the hills and fields. Emily paused to take in the view, feeling the cool breeze on her face. "I never thought I could feel this free," she whispered. Jack smiled, taking her hand gently in his. "You were always strong," he said. "You just needed the right space to see it." Emily squeezed his hand, understanding that her strength had always been within her. It had simply taken time and support to bloom. As the days passed, Emily began to embrace life fully. She returned to hobbies she had abandoned years ago, like painting and sketching, finding joy in creating beauty with her own hands. She organized small gatherings with friends she trusted, rediscovering the warmth of connection and laughter. Each step she took, each new experience, was a testament to the resilience of her spirit and the power of healing. Jack and Emily also worked together to make the ranch a place of learning and care. They taught local children about animals, nature, and the value of patience and compassion. Emily's experiences became lessons for others, showing that strength could be rebuilt even after hardship, that kindness could change lives, and that hope could flourish in the most unexpected places. Through teaching, Emily found an additional sense of purpose, knowing that her journey could inspire and help others who might be struggling in silence. As the seasons changed, Emily faced challenges that tested her resolve. Old fears sometimes resurfaced, doubts crept in, and moments of anxiety reminded her of her past. But she no longer faced these moments alone. Jack's presence was steady, and Emily's own strength had grown to meet the challenges with courage. She learned techniques to calm herself, to breathe through panic, and to remind herself of her worth. Each time she overcame a fear, she gained confidence, understanding that healing was not a single moment but a lifelong process. By the time winter arrived, the ranch was covered in a soft blanket of snow. Emily and Jack would work together, tending to animals in the cold, preparing the land for the months ahead. The quiet of winter brought reflection and gratitude. Emily thought about how far she had come, from a place of fear and isolation to a life filled with trust, companionship, and hope. Each day, she woke with purpose, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she had the strength to face it. One evening, as snowflakes drifted gently from the sky, Emily stood with Jack outside the cabin, watching the lights of the ranch flicker warmly against the night. She felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling that life could be beautiful despite the hardships she had endured. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, and she leaned into his presence not out of dependence but out of shared comfort and trust. In that moment, Emily realized that she had reclaimed her life fully. She had survived, she had healed, and she had found love and friendship that were genuine and enduring. Emily's story was no longer defined by fear. It was a story of resilience, courage, and the power of mercy. The world outside the ranch still held challenges, but she faced them with confidence and determination. She had learned that kindness could exist without expectation, that strength could grow quietly over time, and that hope could flourish even after the darkest storms. As the night settled over the ranch, Emily and Jack stood hand in hand, looking out over the vast, open fields. The moonlight glinted on the snow, and the stars sparkled above them, vast and endless. Emily whispered softly, "Thank you for never leaving me." Jack squeezed her hand gently and replied, "I promised I wouldn't, and I never will." In that moment, Emily knew that her journey had come full circle. She had faced her past, embraced her strength, and found a future filled with safety, love, and freedom. The ranch, the animals, the wide-open sky, and the steady presence of Jack had given her more than comfort. They had given her a chance to live fully and joyfully, to reclaim the happiness that she had been denied for so long. As dawn broke the next morning, painting the fields with light, Emily felt a profound sense of hope and possibility. She walked among the horses, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and realized that she was no longer a girl trapped in fear. She was a woman who had survived, who had grown stronger through pain, and who now had the power to shape her life. And as she looked at Jack smiling beside her, she knew that together they would face whatever the future held with courage, love, and unshakable trust.